Welcome to another episode of Ricardo's Time. Ricardo's Time is a video podcast about objectivism and the philosophy of Ayn Rand. It also teaches you how to communicate objectivist ideas effectively and persuasively. And today we have a great guest. His name is Dan Norton. He has a PhD in philosophy from the University of California, Davis, and he currently works to advance Ayn Rand's ideas online, especially on social media. Welcome, Dan. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Ricardo.
It's a pleasure. So I would like to start by asking you if you could tell us a little more about yourself, so your background, and how did you discover Ayn Rand?
Sure. I am from Virginia originally, and I grew up there, discovered Ayn Rand's right after I finished high school. That summer between high school and college is when I first read Ayn Rand. So I learned about her through my brother. He had recommended that I read the book Philosophy, Who Needs It? That's the first one I read. And I'm not sure why he recommended it to me, but I guess he thought it would be interesting to me. I was already interested in philosophy before I read Ayn Rand. So maybe he noticed that and thought that, well, here's a philosophy book that Dan might find interesting. So for whatever reason, he recommended that. And I picked it up that summer between high school and college, and I was blown away by it. I thought it was amazing. The ideas they made so much sense to me. And it just resonated with me very strongly. And I was so fascinated by it. And I just read everything I can find, starting with the nonfiction. And then it was actually not until a year later that I started reading the fiction.
What's your first book that you read?
First book was Philosophy, Who Needs It? And then I went through other nonfiction books, Virtue of Selfishness and Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, For the New Intellectual, The Romantic Manifesto. I think that was the order, close to that at least. Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, and then I started listening to a lot of the taped courses back then. This was back in the late 1997 is when I first read Rand. And then I guess it was 97, 98 when I started listening to taped courses that you could purchase. So right now there's a lot of free courses online by Leonard Peikoff and other objectivist philosophers or intellectuals. A lot of it is online and available for free these days. But back when I was first getting into it, they were very expensive, and you had to buy them from. It was expensive for me, at least, as a student. And I paid hundreds of dollars for these courses, somewhat with my dad's help, which I appreciate, to get my objectivist education. So I spent my first several years just devouring the Second Renaissance books catalog of taped courses, and after I had read all of the main published written material. Philosophy interested me in a lot of ways. I mean, I think there are so many fascinating issues. One of the biggest ones for me when I first started thinking about philosophic issues was the issue of free will. So, in other words, just to put it in layman's terms, choices, making choices about your life. It seemed like a very important issue as to whether we had free will. Like, are we actually in control of ourselves, of our own lives? Or are we at the mercy of things beyond our control, like the genes that we inherited, or environmental conditioning, or the one that I was wrestling with the most is physics. Like, are we at the mercy of the laws of physics? Like, if we're just composed of material stuff, atoms, and those atoms just act according to physical laws, and we are just big collections of those atoms, well, are we then just big collections of material stuff acting according to the laws of physics, and we don't really have a choice about how our material body acts? Well, that was a pretty disturbing thought, that we don't actually have control over ourselves, because we're at the mercy of scientific laws. And at first I didn't really see a good answer to that. So that really bothered me, and I became kind of obsessed. Maybe that's overstating it, but I couldn't stop thinking about the issue of free will. I thought about it a lot, and I went on to study it as a master's student and write a thesis on it. But it's just that philosophy, it deals with these really crucial issues to human life. Your view of yourself, like, are you a self-determining being, or are you at the mercy of things beyond you? What does it mean to be good? Can you know reality? I mean, these are such fundamental questions, which I thought were really important to get right, if one is going to have a sane view of the world, a sane life. I mean, you could go crazy, I guess, if you have certain philosophic views. You think, you're just caught in a matrix or something. So anyways, I thought that philosophy was a very important field, and I guess it was fascinating enough to me to want to build a career around. So that's why I pursued it.
We're gonna go more deep into that, but before that, I would like to know, you were talking about someone having crazy ideas, for example, and how ideas influence one's life. In your case, how did Ayn Rand influence your life?
Yeah, she's had a tremendous influence on my life. I've just learned so much from her, both in terms of new ideas that I've learned from her, and also thinking methods, like how to process things that I observe, things that I hear. Just to give some concrete examples, like around the time when I was first reading her, I was somewhat influenced by altruism, the idea that it's good to live for other people. It's morally good to do that, and to place others above yourself. I mean, I don't know. I don't think I was consistently, the way I just stated it, I think maybe sounds more like I was committed to altruism than I was. I think maybe I was quite on an egoist premise, but I certainly had at least elements, touches of altruism. So to give an example, I volunteered at a place for, I guess it was people with Alzheimer's disease. So there was elderly people who had Alzheimer's, and I thought it would be a good thing for them to just have someone to interact with, to engage their minds. And I didn't really do this for interested reasons so much as I thought I had some kind of duty to volunteer and help other people out, even though it wasn't that I thought this was going to add much to my life. It's not like I personally knew the people. It's not to say that it's always wrong to volunteer, but I think if you do volunteer, you should be doing so on the premise that this is good for your own life, because it's somehow benefiting your own values. But I don't think that's really the premise I was on. I mean, except maybe in some abstract sense, like, I think it's good to do what's right. And I think at the time, I thought it was right to do some kind of volunteer work, which didn't in any obvious way benefit myself. So I think there was some altruism that was motivating that volunteering that I did. This was only for maybe a month or two. It wasn't long, because it was right around that time that I first read Ayn Rand and was introduced to the idea that self-interest, selfishness, in her sense of the term, is not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. And that got me to rethink the volunteering that I was doing. Am I really doing this because I think it's good for me, or am I just doing this because somehow I picked up the idea that it's good to volunteer and serve others? And once I thought about it, I said, I'm probably doing this for bad reasons. It's not really on the premise of self-interest. So I gave it up. I stopped volunteering. And there are other examples, like I had some collectibles, Star Wars figures that I had collected in childhood I had a pretty good sized collection. I probably could have sold them for several hundred dollars and got the money. But I thought, well, maybe the morally right thing to do is just to give them away for free, give them to charity. So that's what I did. I gave all those away to charity. And then shortly after that, it was about the same time, I read Ayn Rand, and I realized, well, no, that's not necessarily morally good. It's not a bad thing to benefit, to profit. So I wouldn't do that again.
Really interesting. I would like to ask you about your experience in the academic industry, because earlier you were talking about a project you had and the transition you had when you used to focus more on academia. You study in a PhD and you made articles and were very intellectual, like talking to intellectuals from academia. What made you change now to talk to, let's say, regular people who are not philosophers?
Well, I've always had an interest in advancing objectivist ideas in the world. Like from when I first read Ayn Rand's, pretty immediately, I thought, this is what I want to do in my life. These ideas are just so amazing and so important. I want to get these ideas out there. And I guess for a long time, I thought, well, maybe a way to do that is to be a professor. So it's a very, it's often said in objectivism in literature that the way to change the culture is by influencing the philosophers. There's kind of this pyramid. The philosophers influence intellectuals, other people in the humanities, and then they influence journalists, for instance, and people out in the culture. And then these ideas, they filter out from the ivory tower of the philosopher to the broader public. And I thought, well, that seems to make sense. So if I want to have a cultural impact, then maybe I should go into the field of philosophy and engage with the philosophers directly, be a philosophy professor, teach philosophy courses. And that was, I'd say, maybe going into my first couple years of undergraduate, my first couple years as an undergraduate, I thought I might do that, but I was disillusioned by the experience in studying philosophy in the university. I found it pretty boring, actually. I mean, compared to reading Ayn Rand, I mean, she's so amazing and such an incredible writer. To go from that to reading this really dry, hard to understand. I mean, compared to her, she's crystal clear, so powerful. So I found a lot of what I had to spend time studying in academic philosophy very boring and uninteresting. So, and I decided, well, if it's this bad as an undergraduate, it's going to be even more bad, more intensely bad as a graduate student, having to do this like so full time and totally steep myself into it. So I decided I don't want to go to graduate school. I'm going to find something else to do. So I'll try to find some other way to make a living as an intellectual, because I still held on to that goal. I still wanted to be an intellectual, but if it was just going to be misery in the world of academic philosophy, then, well, that's not going to be enjoyable. I don't want to do that. So I looked for something else to do. I applied for a job at the Ayn Rand Institute as an administrative assistant, thinking, that could be a stepping stone to doing more intellectual kind of work there. And maybe I can be an intellectual outside, still a philosopher outside of academia. Like Leonard Peikoff has done lots of intellectual work outside of academia. For a time, he was a professor in traditional colleges, but I think for many years he wasn't. He did his own lecturing. Harry Binswanger also, he spent some time in academia, but also much time outside of it. So there were a few philosophers who were able to make livings outside of academic philosophy, but they also had inheritances. So they were able to do that financially, whereas I wasn't in that situation. So I had to find other jobs to support myself in the meantime. So, but after several years out of academia, I decided to give graduate school a chance. So I worked at ARI for about 5 years and then decided, all right, I'm going to apply for grad school. I had some friends at the time who were in graduate school, and it seemed like they were, I kind of, maybe it was a bit jealous of the kind of career path they seemed to be on. I was like, I want to get in on that. Partly also, I think it was, I had settled down a little bit. I had calmed down from my initial, when I first read Ayn Rand's, I was so riled up and very combative. Like I would get in these very heated arguments with other people. I think many young objectivists, when they first encounter Ayn Rand's, this happens. They're so enthusiastic and they become this warrior for these ideas, and they're breathing fire and on this crusade. And I was pretty combative. My first, I don't know how long this, the first few months certainly, but it was not a very pleasant state to be in, to always be in this very combative mode. It wasn't very conducive to a benevolent sense of life, I think. So I started arguing with people less, and I was less combative to professors, for instance. I wasn't rude, I don't think, but it was kind of confrontational. But over the years, I became much less combative, and I was more capable of just going into a classroom and learning. It wasn't about having a fight, trying to win some arguments. It was more about, I'm here to learn, to get a degree. I have to go through this process if I want to get an advanced degree, which I thought could be helpful to having a philosophical career, to get some kind of credential in it, which other people would recognize. So that was part of my motivation for going to graduate school, get some kind of credential. And by the time I went to graduate school, my combativeness had kind of worn off. So it wasn't as irritating of an experience to be in academic philosophy, because the hostility had gone way down by that time. I kept my eye on the long run goal of, I'm here to do what I need to have the kind of career I want. It's not about converting the professor or other people. So once I had kind of come to terms with that mindset, I was able to tolerate a lot of the bad stuff about academia much better, which allowed me to get through it. But another thing is that the internet has grown a lot over the last, since it started in the late 90s. There wasn't really a way there was no YouTube or Facebook when I first got out of undergrad. There was no such thing as just like starting a YouTube channel and getting lots of subscribers and having a Patreon. There was no Patreon. So there were a lot of tools for making a living as an intellectual that just didn't exist at the time when I was first starting out in academia. and so it wasn't really a live option. I mean, it didn't even occur to me to do the sort of thing that I'm doing now. I mean, so I thought I would just try to make a living either as a professor or maybe work at a think tank like ARI. So given the way, technology has evolved, that's opened up other options. Like Alex Epstein has been a big inspiration in my thinking about like what kind of career might I really enjoy. He's had a great impact in his field of energy and fossil fuels, and he's been able to make a living as an independent intellectual. He's done very well for himself, and I thought, well, if there's some way that I could do that, that would be really fun, and I would enjoy that kind of career. So once I got that idea of trying to use the internet, social media, YouTube, etc., to reach people that just had a lot of appeal to me. I mean, there's a lot of independence that comes along with that. I can just pretty much do everything the way I like, and that has a lot of appeal to me. So, and it's still a way of advancing these ideas in the culture, and I still think it's right that academia and philosophy departments have influence, and I can still engage with those people, and I've done that. Like I've had conversations with professors, and actually one of them, my advisor, he showed our 2-hour conversation, or he assigned that conversation to the students in his intro philosophy course to watch. So it was part of the curriculum, and so I'm still interested in engaging with academia, but right now,
in a different
I kind of
way.
like doing it from the outside rather than from the inside.
I understand.
But I also like engaging with others as well in the general public.
But I think you also encounter rejection to Ayn Rand ideas in academia, mostly, I guess.
Yeah, there's at least most professors, I would say they're either just not interested or don't know very little about Ayn Rand's, or they're actively hostile to Ayn Rand's. I'd say it's a small minority that has an interest in Ayn Rand's, and that might not be a very enjoyable environment to be in, to spend decades of my life in. People who are either hostile or just don't care about these ideas that I'm very passionate about, and I want to help see spread. So yeah, I think that's one factor that influenced my decision of what kind of environment do I want to be in. Also, if you're in academia, typically you need to publish to maintain a position and get tenure. And the kinds of things I would have to publish on, at least right now, I'm not very interested in writing in that academic kind of style. Maybe I am a little bit at least, but I don't have much of an appetite right now to spend hours and hours and hours, of my time every week for years on end to write academic philosophy articles. There's other sorts of engaging with people that I'd like to do than writing academic philosophy articles. Yeah, that would be a big part of the career I would have if I were to go in the professor routes. At least for most positions. I mean, there are some jobs where they just require you to teach, but I think most professors, they have some combination of research responsibilities as well as teaching responsibilities, and then also administrative responsibilities, just running the department on a day-to-day basis. You're on hiring committees. You have to read all these applications, and I've heard people who've been in that position complain quite a bit about the administrative burden that comes with being even a tenured professor. So that's another consideration. So there's just a variety of things which have led me to think that, well, maybe something outside academia would be more enjoyable for me. It's at least worth giving a shot. I want to try it out and see if I can do it. So that's what I've been doing. I still have to do something else to financially self-sustain myself. I've been doing food delivery, actually. I've been driving for DoorDash because I need to do that to have an income. But I've started a Patreon account to support myself doing intellectual work, and I'm hoping to grow that so that eventually I don't have to do anything else. I can just do my intellectual work, focus full time on that. But
Wow,
right now,
nice.
I like the freedom and independence that I have right now on the path I'm on.
And you can have fun at the same time.
Yeah, that's the goal. Yeah, Alex has been an inspiration. He also worked at the Ayn Rand Institute for, I think, about 7 years before he went off to start his own think tank. So he had some more recognition, I think, before he started to make a name for himself publicly. He was already known at the Ayn Rand Institute, whereas I think I was, I didn't really have that kind of springboard as much because I wasn't working there in an intellectual capacity. So I'm kind of starting from a different spot. So, but so there's similarities and there's differences. But yeah, there aren't many people who I think are doing this kind of path and have actually made it successful. Alex is probably the best example, the best I can think of anyways.
Yeah, and you can write your own book still, and have influence on the culture as well. So finally, I would like you to explain us a little more about your project called the Selfishness Project. What is it about? What do you do? What do you want to accomplish?
Okay, so the Selfishness Project, I started that a couple of years ago. This is right around the time I was finishing up my PhD work. It's about advancing Ayn Rand's ideas specifically on selfishness. So this is an issue where most people, they hear the term selfish, they think this is evil. It's bad to be selfish. If you're selfish, that means you're a rude jerk. You don't care about anybody else. You just step over other people to get what you want. And Ayn Rand has a very different view of selfishness, and I think she has a lot of important, valuable things to say about selfishness. And I wanted to help convey her idea of selfishness to the world. This whole project started out of this little project of getting clear on what the definition is of this term, but it kind of evolves into more of just having discussions with people about selfishness and bringing Ayn Rand's ideas into the conversation. So whether or not it's right to use the word selfish to refer to the kind of life that she thinks is good, living an honest, rational, productive kind of life, that's what she means by selfish. She doesn't mean being a rude jerk who doesn't care about other people's rights or anything. So regardless of the word we're going to use to describe what she thinks is a good life for yourself to live, just bring that perspective to the conversation with people and see if I can get people to rethink what is actually good for themselves, to rethink whether it's good to live for other people, to be altruistic. As I said in the beginning, you asked, how did Ayn Rand influence my own life? Well, I gave some examples of like the volunteering for other people or giving away for free things to charity because I thought that was better, morally better than trying to sell it and get some money off of it. So she gives a different perspective on those kinds of actions. And I wanted to convey that perspective to other people. And often usually I'd say the conversations didn't revolve around the particular word that is used. I don't think that's the most important thing. Although I do think it's an issue that should be addressed somehow if one's going to write a whole book on this subject. But I could have conversation with people that didn't address that word choice issue. Just talk about the phenomenon itself. What is a good way to live and why? And learned from Ayn Rand about what is a good life to these conversations. So that's what the Selfishness Project was all about.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for your time and for this conversation. It was great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely.